Well, hello everyone. This is Data Driven Formula One with Patrick, Henz, and Ganna Pogrebna. Hi, Patrick.
Hello, Ganna. Hello, all.
Hello, all. Yeah, we had quite a long break, mostly due to me. So this was kind of caused by the COVID booster that I had.
But we are back.
Yeah, but it's great to be back. And today we're talking about 1977. So very exciting season. So let's just get to it.
Yeah, exactly. And I would compare it a little bit to our classic play, which we have in 3 acts. So the Lauda's Ferrari years, it would be called this play. Lauda, well, in fact, it's not really in 3 acts, but in 1974, he was the apprentice, the Paduan, and Clay Regazzoni was the number 1 driver, but in 75, this changed. Lauda was the number 1 driver with Ferrari. He was the fastest driver, sitting in the fastest car. So we have here the normal first act of a classic play. The hero starts his journey and is successful. Then we had the last year, 1976, the hero struggled, but thanks accepted the challenge, and due to this grow, he not won because James Hunt, we know. And now we are 1977, and this is like the classic 90s third act, meaning our hero grew through this challenge and became stronger and will be finally successful.
Yeah. So very cool analogy. So let's just, I guess, start with the season. And yeah, we kind of talked through the 1976 year, and yeah, that was definitely a kind of turning year in the career of Niki Lauda. So I completely agree with you, Patrick, here. Yeah, and you can see that a very interesting season. You know, lots of different drivers kind of taking the lead during this season, and yeah, quite a lot of. I mean, I just want to say before we begin discussing the season itself, there were quite a few pole positions for Mario Andretti, right? Probably more than any other driver, he was on pole. But yeah, but these pole positions did not realize into wins, or did not.
Yeah, and
not all of them realize into wins. Yeah.
Right, and maybe more extreme for James Hunt. I mean, if we just see the pole positions, the first 3 races, James Hunt always the reigning champion, always on pole position, and after this, he also had 3 more pole positions. And we will discuss this a little bit later in today's episode, because Niki Lauda said in an interview, and this was also famously used in the Rush movie, that James Hunt was maybe lacking of motivation, but our data maybe speak a little bit a different story, and we will come back to this a little bit later.
Yeah, and I just want again to mention, this is like I think a good place to mention Rush again, because we mentioned it when we talked about 1976 season. But of course, if you want to sort of refresh your memory a little bit more about what happened in 1976, 1977, Rush is a good movie to watch. Again, we would like to make a footnote that the conflict between James Hunt and Niki Lauda was exaggerated, but you can watch our specials on this. Right, so we have specials on a special on James Hunt, and we talked quite a lot about this dichotomy between James Hunt and Niki Lauda, also in our team duels special. So check out those specials, and we actually have some quotes from Niki Lauda and how he describes he described his standoff or so-called standoff with James Hunt back in the day. So it's always important to understand that obviously movies are, not always the exact footprint of the reality, and this is definitely the case here.
Yeah, I completely agreed. 1976 also brought a number of changes. The first one, the dawn of the turbo age, especially started by the French Renault team. Not from the very first race, but they would enter Formula One like in the middle of the season. So this is something which, of course, had a highly impact also in the next years up to today.
Yeah, that's right. And, I think this is also a very important stage of the development of, automotive and racing in particular. And this is also kind of the turning point of 1970s. And I also think that this kind of started to signify the decline of the Lotus team, because one of my favorite teams throughout 70s was Lotus, and we discussed it a lot with Patrick. We discussed Colin Chapman and how the Lotus cars were always kind of the lightest and very competitive. But I think this particular change had a dramatic impact on Lotus team, along with obviously other reasons, financial things and other factors. But definitely this innovation brought some important challenges that the Lotus team couldn't handle, I think. Well, that's obviously my personal opinion. And I don't know if many people would agree, but yeah.
But of course you're speaking here longer term, because on the short term Lotus was still quite competitive.
Yeah, they were competitive, but I'm just saying this is the start of the decline, right?
And important, if the start of the decline, this doesn't mean that decline is already visible.
Yes,
at least not if you don't have any insider knowledge, because for the spectators, 77, 78, Lotus was still highly competitive. And in fact, on the short run, thanks to the other big change, they had been maybe the best car at the end of 77, and especially in the next year. So they had maybe the last of the big ideas by Colin Chapman, the dawn of the ground effect cars, I called it here. So this was practically the last great concept he integrated with Lotus that still brought them back to being competitive, and the next year having the car which you have to beat.
Yeah, that's right. So I don't mean that it happened rapidly, but if you look, when I did this an analysis of competitiveness in Formula One, you could definitely see how Lotus spikes kind of above Ferrari and McLaren in 1970s, but then it declines, right? And that's what I mean. So I think that 1977 was kind of this turning year for them. But of course, they were competitive for a number of years after 1977.
Yeah. So 77 was also the first year when we had the ground effect cars, which first implemented, as mentioned, by Lotus, and then copied by everybody until later in the first half of the 1980s. It was forbidden because these cars became so fast. And the problem is, if for whatever reason you lose the contact with the track, for example, you are a little bit on the left, on the right, on the grass, practically this, without warning, the ground effect drops off, and this can lead to very dangerous accidents. That was the reason why later in the 80s these ideas had been forbidden again. And maybe today it comes a little bit back.
Yeah, that's right. And, we need to always remind ourselves that, again, many engineers and visionaries who work with technology within teams, they all know how to make the cars fast, right? However, they always have to kind of counterbalance their thoughts with what FIA allows. And of course, the job of FIA is to keep everyone safe, right, on the track. And of course, this is a very important trade-off. And like we said before, Lotus was not very safe for the drivers to drive, unfortunately. And this is something that we have to keep in mind. And of course, the ground effect cars. It was a great innovation, but it was not sustainable in the long run because obviously it's very difficult to make them safe, let's just say.
Yeah, well, nearly impossible, and this is why it was forbidden, because there's always the risk that you brake too late, and then you're on the grass, and when you're on the grass, you lose out of the sudden the ground effect, and the car crashes quite heavily into something.
Absolutely.
Okay, and with these changes, we will start going to Argentina, and a team which was quite successful, was relatively small, coming from Canada, the Walter Wolf racing team, and is also, I think, thanks to the talent of Jody, who won the first race of the season.
Yeah, and so we also see that Carlos Reutemann was doing quite well from the beginning of the season, and he was third in Argentina and also first in Brazil, which I think is also a nice progression. And here again, we want to remind you that James Hunt had the pole, right? And it's a little bit strange that he didn't manage to realize his poles into wins right early in the season.
Exactly, but we will dig a little bit deeper.
Yes, of course, and of course, very good to see Niki Lauda in third place in Brazil. So we have quite a nice podium there with Carlos Reutemann in the first, James Hunt in second, and Niki Lauda in third place.
Yeah. And of course, for Niki Lauda, motivator, as Reutemann and Lauda haven't been the biggest friends.
That's right. Yeah, very exciting race in South Africa, right?
Yeah, exciting, but unfortunately very tragic. If you see the accident, very tragic, and also, let's say, from the risk, quite a strange thing what happened. And I mean, we can read it here. Also for our listeners who just with us with the audio podcast. So we are in Kyalami, South Africa. On lap 22, the shadow Ford of the Italian driver Renzo Sorsi pulled off to the left side of the main straight just after the brow of a hill and a bridge over the track. He was having technical problems, especially with his full metering unit, and fuel was pumping directly onto the engine, which of course caused the fire. Sorsi could get out of the car immediately, and due to this, a young marshal was running over the track, and Tom Price, the driver, was unable to avoid hitting this only 19-year-old race marshal called Frederik Jansen van Wuren, and with this killed him, but also he himself got killed as the marshal's fire extinguisher struck him on the head. What killed him, and nevertheless, the car with the driver went all the way through the straight, and they still collided with the Ligier from Jacques Lafitte. So we have here a very tragic accident again, where these two people had been killed.
Exactly, and so we also we discussed a lot how at the at the beginning of Formula One in 1950s we had a lot of incidents and collisions involving audience, right? And not so much we didn't so much discuss what was happening with marshals, but of course marshals were also very often victims of high speeds. And I mean, this is a really notorious case, and it also had quite a significant impact on the development of Formula One, because now obviously marshals are a lot better protected than they used to be. So definitely no one is would be allowed to run across the field anymore. And so the sport again, all the tragic events that happened earlier in the history of Formula One, of course, have then impact on safety regulations. And the sport has learned again from these tragic events. And so luckily nowadays I don't remember the last case when the marshal would be involved in an accident. So that means
that's correct.
The protection is pretty good at the moment.
And that's correct. But let's say still in the 70s, 80s, it unfortunately happened, which is, let's say, especially tragic, you may say, because the drivers, I mean, they are aware that they are risking their life, and they, at least the top drivers, get a lot of money for this. But these Frank marshals, these race marshals, they're here for their pure often because they really enjoy racing. They're not highly paid, and nevertheless they are risking their life when they are trying, for example, to cross the track, or as we will see later, when they try to get other people out of a risky area.
Yeah, that's right.
And with this, we are staying in the Americas. Sorry, we are not staying in the Americas. Of course, we are moving back to the Americas after we had been in South Africa. So we are now at Long Beach, where we have the victory for Mario Andretti on the mentioned Lotus, which was the first home victory of a US driver, and also the first victory of a ground effect car.
Yeah, that's right. And like we said before, Mario Andretti actually managed to score quite a few poles that season. And again, we discussed in our specials that Lotus, despite their very innovative ideas, they often suffered from reliability issues, and these reliability issues actually backfired in quite a lot of races. And they play an important role in basically in the outcome that's we see in the actual race. But I mean, both I think US and Spanish Grand Prix were very successful for the Lotus team and Mario Andretti.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And besides this, we see the debuts of important names of the sport. In Spain, the debut of the Williams Grand Prix racing team, at that time still using the March, and later in Monte Carlo, the debut of Riccardo Patrese, who also stayed a long time in Formula One.
Yeah, so I also want to say that, and I want to say a few words about Williams' team. So obviously Frank Williams was a great visionary in Formula One, and his background was in mechanics. So he never got an engineering degree, but he was a very, very talented mechanic. And Williams kind of started from this small team, but eventually they grew into one of the most famous Formula One teams. And one of the great features of this team for many years was that it was using many kind of innovative ideas that are out there on the market. So this was the team that didn't have large budgets, or at least the budgets were never as large as those available to Ferrari or McLaren. And some other teams, for example, in the 90s, we had Toyota, who kind of had a very, very high budget compared to other teams. But at the same time, they would always manage to accomplish, a nice car. And this allowed them to be very competitive for many years and sustainable, which is also important. And also another cool thing about Frank Williams, he was really cool, at his entire history as a principal. He was very cool at picking talented people who would drive and support the team, and he grew within the team quite a few cool engineers. So I'm sure we will have a special on Frank Williams, but I just wanted to mention it here because this is the first year for Williams Grand Prix engineering.
Yeah. So you would say that let's say the Williams team is somehow taking the position what Lotus had been the decades before. A small team with a lot of innovation, with having an eye on the young talent.
Yeah, I would. I kind of was trying to gradually go into that conclusion, but I think this seems to be the case, right? And this is a very interesting research question around sustainability, right? What makes a sustainable Formula One team? And I think Williams' team is really unique. It's like a unicorn because they demonstrated that you don't have to have large budget to make a great engineering and develop a great team. So essentially, they demonstrated that with the right leadership, you can actually achieve a lot, even in a sport where it's very difficult to enter, right? It's very difficult to compete. So, but back in 1977, it looked like, yet another small team, right? Like Surtees or something like this. But this was really a very, very, very good start for this really important team in the history of Formula One.
Yeah, good. Yeah. And with this, let's continue. Belgium, Zolder, one of the tracks I also know personally. Here we had the first and also unfortunately only victory for the Swedish driver Gunnar Nielsen. He had a very short career. He finished at the end of 77 and would die at the end of 78 due to cancer. So for this tragically a quite short career and life for this talented person.
Yeah, and we were going to do. I'm hoping soon we will do the special on Ronnie Peterson again, another Scandinavian talent. So in fact we don't have. So we do have quite a lot of famous Scandinavian drivers, but probably
up to today.
Yeah. But I want to say that there are not many of them. There are many famous people, but not that many of them. And it was really cool to see the kind of the rise of Scandinavian racing back in 1970s. So definitely, Gunnar Nielsen and Ronnie Peterson are among those great Scandinavian drivers.
Yeah. And it's actually based on these two. We had also a Grand Prix in Sweden, because as we saw in the past, if you have local drivers who are competitive, then you have the local interest. And this triggers that you get one of the Grand Prix, at least in the 70s, as an opposite maybe today where countries buy their Grand Prix even if they don't have much relation to Formula One, but that would be a different topic.
That's right. That's right. And
Yeah.
all French victory, right? Do you want to say a few
all
words about
French
that?
victory. We saw this in the past with Italians. We saw this with, of course, with British teams, and this was for the first time all French victory, and something which we will see also, of course, later, especially then also with in the times with Alain Prost.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of French drivers, now we are going to France, to Dijon, and here again, Mario Andretti, John Watson, James Hunt, and besides all the technological progress of the ground effect car, still this design, this black gold with the British Union Jack, it's iconic.
Yeah, it is an iconic look for Lotus. So many people remember this car, and definitely black and gold. I think is a combination that is quite popular in Formula One cars. But yeah, this the cool thing was that of course they stepped away from the British green, but they've always been very innovative that way, Lotus, and yeah, definitely very famous look.
Exactly, and as you said, quite popular. So it was copied by other teams. In the latest years, we saw was it 2 years ago the Haas team with a similar design, and in the same year, 77, also we have the Canadian Walter Wolf car in a very similar design, and also later I think would be a Wolf is a very interesting topic because they copied practically not only the livery, but later they start selling cigarettes. So completely the other way around. That first the black and gold, and then got the idea we look like John Player, so why not sell cigarettes?
Yeah, that's right. And actually there would be quite a few, I think, entries in American Grand Prix where you would see also black and gold by smaller teams. But again, great result for Mario Andretti.
Yeah.
Silverstone, which is always and Hockenheim, two circuits where you never know what's gonna happen. It's almost like a spa. Because it very often rains and things get interesting. The cool I think the cool event that we all remember is of course Gilles Villeneuve's first race, his debut at McLaren. Really cool thing to see. But in terms of a victory, no surprises there. James Hunt came first. It's his home circuit, so that's expected. And of course, like Patrick said, there was also this is where we also saw quite a few innovations from Renault with RS01 car, right? So I do remember this race. It was very good. So if you have time, by all means, have a look at the footage from the race. I just want to remind to our viewers, because sometimes they start watching our series in the middle. So we only use materials that we are sourcing ethically. So we're not using footage without permission. So this is why you normally see the pictures where we're carefully citing the authors and sources, and we have the kind of this ethical attitude towards using materials. So this is why, in order to actually look at the footage, you would need to go and find it from the official, I guess the channel that we can recommend is the official channel Formula One channel and
Right.
look at footage from the right owners.
Right, and if I'm correct, Formula One, they also have a paid service with a kind of streaming platform where they have a lot of classic races.
Yeah, that's right. And
Yeah.
definitely, keep in mind that this is all copyrighted material, and you do need to acknowledge the people who did the work.
Right.
So it's better
Right.
to obviously ethically view these things.
Exactly. And so the first race of the Renault Turbo, I remember, of course, an innovation, but really Renault had been struggling to make it work. So it took several years until the car not only was fast, but also had been able to win a championship. But they believed in their solution, and at the end, the success came for the French Renault team.
Yeah, it was very. I think it was a very important period in the development of French automotive in principle, because French automotive was in quite a bad state, and then I think it received a lot of attention from the government. And we saw it in not only in racing but also in kind of the production of regular cars. When Renault and Peugeot, they had quite a significant amount of investment from the government, I think it was almost kind of the matter of national pride to make French
of course, I mean, Renault was a governmental company, so and maybe also you can align this a little bit in general, maybe with French culture, as maybe in opposite, let's say, to in Germany, French had been much more optimistic related technology in the future. I mean, you see other important the technical developments. You see they had been, I think, the first having the high-speed trains. They had the Concorde. French is still very much into atom energy. So they have a lot, maybe a lot more positive focus on technology as other countries, as let's say as Germany. So no, that's surprising to have this turbo car coming from France.
Yeah, and I think we need to again stress the fact that it was, I think, like by the time when Renault started to develop very competitive cars, it was again a matter of national pride. It was really important for the entire nation to actually make automotive work as well as racing work, making the competitive car, which is great. I mean, it's always great to see French manufacturing and French French ideas in engineering. So we will see quite a few, especially in the 90s. There were some brilliant things that they have done. So yeah, great. Wow, despite all the pitfalls that Patrick mentioned, great thing. Great innovation from Renault. And Germany, where we have probably the worst record, I don't know, the opposite of the record, the biggest failure in Formula One. Well, it's a contender for the biggest failure, I guess, in Formula One. With Henz, right?
Yeah, it's somehow, let's say, one of the side notes, because Henz, he was famous with the touring cars, especially with the Ford Capri Zack-Speed, and he wasn't participating the whole championship, but had the opportunity for a ride for the home race. So. As you said, one of the biggest failures. He was the first driver in history, and maybe the only. I don't remember anything else. So first,
me neither.
He did not.
I think this was the only case.
Yeah. So first, he did not qualify. But again, please consider that he wasn't experienced with Formula One. I'm sure he hadn't had a car which makes you automatically qualify. So it's not his personal failure.
Yeah. We just want to say that Henz is actually a very good driver. So it's
Yes,
and
exactly.
this is what makes it so amazing, right? That this happened to him, of all people. Yeah.
Exactly. So he not qualified for the race, but for some reason, for some failure in the organization of the event, he nevertheless started the race, but he couldn't finish due to a technical problem. But besides this, he also got disqualified as he not qualified.
Yeah, that's right. But very successful race for Niki Lauda, as he came first in this race.
And again, Jody Scheckter strong with the Walter Wolf car. And of course, very good result for another German driver, Hans-Joachim Stuck, who also had was more famous later for the endurance car and also touring cars. But at that time, he was driving together with, I think, Vittorio Brambilla. Yeah, he was together with Vittorio Brambilla in the March.
Yeah, so speaking of German drivers, my students last semester, I was teaching a whole course in visual analytics, and my students did some analysis of Formula One, and somehow they found that if you're a German driver, then you are somehow more likely to win in Formula One. I'm not sure. I didn't check that, so I think we should definitely check that and maybe have a special discussing like drivers from different countries.
I mean, maybe it depends when you do when you did the study. If you did the study in the 1970s, I mean, German drivers had been very far away from winning anything.
Yeah, it was on the whole, from 1950s. I looked at the whole history from 1950 until 2020 or 2021 even. And basically, this was the finding. I have to say that I didn't check, but here's a statement that we would need to verify. No offense to, of course, any other nationalities, and like I said, we appreciate all talent in Formula One. But I'm just saying there is this stylized fact that my students produced, and definitely I think we should at least try to run our own regressions here and see whether we receive the same result.
Yeah, in fact, some time ago, I saw a documentary on YouTube, and I think it was from one of the German TV channels. So it's there officially back from the 1970s, where they discussed why German drivers hadn't have the opportunity to win. And one of the points in the 1970s had been that there have been practically no German industry sponsoring. I mean, there hadn't been any German cars, but they also had the big German companies like, let's say, Siemens or AEG or whatever. There had been no German sponsors. So in the 1970s, there had been talented driver and they had their success, but not in Formula One. Mostly German drivers, they went to endurance racing, where we had the very strong Porsche cars
that's right.
competing.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about Mercedes before with their exit, and so it's great that they're back, and now we see great performance from Mercedes cars in Formula One in recent seasons.
And thinking, I just have to put a side note, because I think in 77, a new German team participated, ATS, also in yellow, and we will come to this later when we speak about the cars.
Yeah. But this is something that we need to check, and we will.
Exactly.
Okay, Austria. Again, very interesting circuit. We don't get to talk about it much, but good race for Niki Lauda and Hans-Joachim Stuck, and of course Alan Jones in the first place in
Yes.
shadow car, which again we will look at engineering of the shadow car and you will see. Absolutely amazing.
And of course, the victory is, I would assume, strongly is related to the talent of Alan Jones, who will be also quite successful in the next years because the Shadow wasn't one of the strongest car in the field.
Yeah, and if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see, or Spotify, I guess, also showing us.
Yeah.
You can also see Alan Jones on your screen right now. So that's the guy.
Yeah, but I think this would have been a little bit later.
Yeah, it's a later picture, but he's not. I'm just saying that probably not many people know what he looks like, unless you are like a Formula One junkie like me and Patrick. So if you haven't seen the guy, this is definitely check out the video on YouTube or Spotify.
Right. And besides this, again, a good result for Hans-Joachim Stuck on the March with the third position in Spielberg.
Yeah, that's right. And again, as you can see, pretty good run generally in Austria, Netherlands, and Italy for Niki Lauda with first and second place. Respectively. Yes. And again, Mario Andretti did really well in Monza, which is very exciting circuit, very difficult to drive, like we explained before in several specials. Again, like Patrick said.
And something similar to a home Grand Prix for Mario Andretti, as he was born in the Kingdom of Italy.
That's right. So, again, so this is, I think, kind of the disappointment of the season was that Mario Andretti didn't kind of manage to realize all his poles into wins, but Monza was one of the exceptions.
Yeah, but I mean, not his fault, but related to the reliability or the missing reliability of his car.
Yeah. Well, we're not blaming anyone here, just saying that, okay, it happened.
Just to underline
this is a fact, yes. And kind of the intrigue of the season finished or was decided, the fate of the season was decided in US, where it was already clear who the champion was going to be. And like Patrick said, Niki Lauda did really well that season. And, I guess it's not very obvious from the initial table that we've shown, but if you look at the whole kind of standings in each race, you understand that he did pretty well, with kind of being on podium almost at every race. Even when he wasn't first, he was either second or third. And, this is great result for Niki Lauda. And, I mean, really well-deserved because of, all the previous troubles and really being so brave by kind of getting back into the driving seat after what happened to him. Right. So
exactly. So it was an interesting year. I mean, he was not dominating. I mean, he was not winning too many races, but he did quite intelligently score points, and this, of course, no surprise, as his nickname was the computer. And also, the race in Watkins Glen showed his special character. I mean, he was already after 77. Is coming back so soon after his accident, somehow destroyed his relationship with Enzo Ferrari. So in 78, he was in negotiations with Brabham. In fact, he already decided to leave to Brabham, and after he won the championship with the Ferrari, he decided to not go to Canada and Japan, but let somebody else driving the Ferrari car.
Yeah, and this is again, it's really again great thinking from Niki Lauda. So we discussed his very rational and kind of statistically oriented mind. And again, so here's he is again thinking as a team player and thinking, okay, well, let's just get this, this experience. So let's just make sure that someone else gets this experience. So it's really,
Well,
really...
but I'm not sure. Yeah, okay. They already Ferrari. It was not only decided the individual championship, but also Ferrari won the constructors championship. So let's say with this, let's say he did his job for securing both titles. On the other hand, you may argue that he's a little bit egoistic, related to sponsors, maybe related to his mechanics. But I mean, this is a point of discussion. You may have the both opinions, I think.
Yeah. I'm just saying that the time could be gained in training, right, and to preparing for the next season. That's what I mean. So, and he basically making that decision. He just gave an opportunity for the team to better prepare for the next season. So that's what I mean. I don't mean that it's necessarily like seeing him in performances elsewhere. But
But I mean, this was
this is a rational thing to do, right? I mean, you won already, so this is it.
And this is was his character. Niki Lauda was always very straight, and he underlined, for example, in his book, that if you take a decision, that you have to stick to your decision, not change it, whatever happens. So he was very transparent with this, so quite predictable behavior.
Yeah, and I'm sure that this was probably discussed early on within the team. Yeah, and again, we see the victory from Jody Scheckter in Canada, but like Patrick said, the earlier incident with the Marshall was not the only one that season, and we also had a tragic death of Marshall and a photographer, right, in Japan. So unfortunately, the kind of the end of the season was also kind of overshadowed by this by more tragic events.
Yes, and as we mentioned in the beginning, here the Marshal, he wanted to get people out of this unsafe location. So he was worried about other people's safety, and due to this, lost his life.
Yeah, that's right. And again, the photographer was also killed, and we discussed previously at several events where it was initially kind of the audience in general was at risk, and then photographers had some special permissions to get closer to the track, to the circuit, and very often it would backfire in tragic accidents when a photographer would be also involved.
Mother incidents after this, as both Carlos Reutemann and James Hunt not stayed until receiving for the podium. They wanted to prefer to going home, maybe understandable after this tragic accident. So Patrick Depailler had been the only one standing on the podium, and after this, the regulations had been changed. So if you are finishing a race in the first three positions, you have to stay and you have to be on the podium if you like it or not.
Yeah, and I mean, it is it is difficult to blame them for not wanting to stay. It's psychologically it's very difficult, of course, and especially after a whole season, right? And they were obviously No,
Yeah.
for example, James Hunt did not win the season. It probably was also related to that. So there were probably many reasons, but yeah. On the other hand, I agree that if you cannot show up to your own yeah, to your own podium, that's pretty bad because
Yeah.
you know the fans are there, whether you like it or not, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And let's say as the last, and this only as a side note, Ian Scheckter, the brother of Jody Scheckter, he was expelled from Japan due to having only a tourist visa and not a working visa. This also, of course, based on political reasons. Please remember that at that time, South Africa still had the apartheid regime, and the Scheckter brothers are South Africans.
Yeah.
So it was a pure political topic. This was not related to their personal opinions or political ideas. So they just had been expelled because they had been South Africans, independent what they think or not think regarding the apartheid regime.
Yeah, and you know, we recently saw also interesting events with other sports, right? When even quite prominent athletes would not be let into the country due to kind of COVID standing, not political.
Here you amazed. I mean, here you can argue that he had or had not the requirements to enter. It was not just based from which country you're coming.
Yeah. I think it also has to do that everyone has to be treated the same, right? We saw that recently with Novak Djokovic and his entry into Australia, where you know, on the one hand, like everyone obviously wants him to compete. But on the other hand, you know, everyone understands that if you decide to apply the same rule to everyone, then you shouldn't look at whether that's a famous person or not famous person. And so there was a lot of controversy around that. But I think the decision ultimately was to deport him because, you know, he really didn't have the vaccinations. And if everyone has to have the vaccinations, then everyone has to have vaccination.
That's right.
So again, like if you know the visa should have been work visa and it wasn't, then you know there it is. That's the rule.
It was correct. If he not had the adequate visa, then you have to treat a Formula One driver the same as any other person.
Any other person, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right, and that's you know that's fair. That's how it is. Because we often see these double standards applied to famous people, and you know, well, Japan just showed that they're not the country where this is possible. I mean, again, this is of course, you know, we don't know how this could have affected the result, and you know, maybe if Ian Scheckter was there, maybe the result would have been different. But at the same time, you know, I think it's if really they just wanted to apply the rules and not kind of play some politics, then of course it is a fair thing to do.
But with this, we finished this season, and we will speak a little bit about the cars.
Let's look at the cars.
And no surprise, because we already mentioned it, Ferrari won for a third time in a row. Remember, the year before, James Hunt won the Driver Championship, but nevertheless, Ferrari got the Constructors Championship. So now the third time they won, and they won exactly with this very beautiful car. And after this, the second position, Lotus, with the very fast, but unfortunately not that reliable car. McLaren, same, fast, but not reliable, and we will come to this later. Surprise for me, the fourth position is the Wolf Ford And here I think this is also related to Jody Scheckter's talent as a driver.
Yeah, that's right. And I just want to also say that, in a sense, the second, third, and fourth place is not that exciting here because the difference between Ferrari and the second standing team is 33 points. It's a huge difference. And again, this was not so obvious, right, from the standings, from the wins, but became obvious if you looked at the whole standings.
Exactly. So I think it's fair to say that it was mostly thanks to the sustainability of the Ferrari, the reliability, because if they had been working, many times the Lotus and McLaren had been faster.
Mm-hmm. And also shows you a different strategy that you can apply. I mean, we saw it in several previous seasons that, you don't have to win every race, but if you sustainably you get into top 3, that gets you the title.
Yeah. And after Wolf, just to finish, we have the Brabham Alfa Romeo. We was also very beautiful car. Tyrrell, Shadow, Ligier, Fittipaldi, Ensign, Surtees, Penske, and unfortunately without points, the Japanese Kojiyama Ford, LC Ford, LBRM, which was the last season, I think, as the official team. Renault, Boro Ford, Apollon Ford, and McGuire Ford. Teams which I'm sure most of us never heard of, to be honest.
Yeah, many people wouldn't know, right? That's right.
Yeah. If anybody wants to have a special about Boro Ford, please send us a message.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's look at the cars. So this is the car that Patrick also demonstrated in the model form. And this is Niki Lauda, as you can see from... so if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see the picture of Niki Lauda. As you can see, very cool, iconic car, red car with number 1 on it.
And
absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
And a consequent evolution of the last years, and this, of course, the reason why the car was so reliable, because this was a consequent evolution and no revolution.
Yeah, and for those of you who are just listening to us, this is we're talking about 312 T2 Ferrari.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, McLaren, also very sleek and cute car with Marlboro with Marlboro sponsorship and kind of orange. Which was
I think maybe this is the quality of the photo.
Yeah, it's reddish, but I mean more into the orange. So it was red. I agree. So it kind of was red car, but kind of more orange red than Ferrari. So Ferrari is really deep red.
This is opposite to later in the 1980s, where in one season I remember Keke Rosberg had some kind of an orange Marlboro design, as Marlboro had been considering changing the colors of its products, but this was just 1 year.
Yeah, but for McLaren, orange was their color, for traditional color for many years. And so I just wanted to say that even if it's red, it's kind of orange for McLaren. Like orange is a new red.
Right. And also remember, remember if you saw our episode about the 76, the M26 was the car which already should have been starting in the 76 season, but they never got it really running in 76. So it only debuted, but they only used it once in 76. And for the whole year, they used it now this year. But again, the reliability wasn't really there.
Mm-hmm. Again, for those of you who are just listening to us, we're talking about McLaren M26. And yeah, if you
Yep,
see us,
and
if you're watching us, then yeah, you see the photo on your screen.
And of course, loved by the fans, the Tyrrell P34 in his second and last year, the six-wheeler. We discussed a little bit six-wheeler in our special edition. Maybe a lot of people may think that six-wheelers had been banned due to regulations after 77, but in fact it was Tyrrell who understood that this solution wouldn't go anywhere, so they switched back to the four-wheelers. So it wasn't that they had been forbidden, at least not in the 70s. Later, I think the regulation excluded six-wheelers like in 82 or 83.
Mm-hmm. And
Even
also,
if nobody tried to really raise them again.
yeah, and also very interesting sponsorships on this car, where it's kind of just basically written, travelers checks and other things. But the cool thing again that they are very loyal to the blue color, and you can see that it's a French car from far away. And so, this is P34 Tyrrell.
Exactly, not as competitive as in the year before, and that's why Ken Tyrrell understood that this solution wouldn't go anywhere, so switch back to four-wheelers.
Mm-hmm.
And with this, we are coming to the Brabham BT45B in the another iconic design, Martini Racing.
Racing, yeah. We discussed Italian sponsorship, and we looked at this car then. Brilliant design, really cool colors and color combinations, and Martini sponsorship kind of added to this colorful design. Yes.
Yes,
and it is a nice car. It is a very. I mean, I know that it didn't do well competitively, but it is very cute and sleek and nice looking.
Yeah, designed by Gordon Murray, who later founded his own company and is selling now super sports cars. So if you have some millions.
Spare millions laying around, definitely. Good. This will be money well spent.
Go to I think GordonMurrayCars.com or something like this, and you can see them.
Lotus that we mentioned before, in gold and black. This is again very famous design, and this is Lotus 7.8 on your screens, and something that we also saw the kind of a different picture earlier of the 77 model, and but you can.
Unfortunately, we don't have a photo from under the car because this was the first car with a ground effect, and this based on directly on Colin Chapman, as he was an engineer. He studied the works of other engineers, especially airplane engineers. For example, from the Havilland Mosquito. And the idea was to have the car as a reverse swing, so that with high speeds, you not go in the air, but you do the opposite, but stick to the ground. So this concept has been related to airplanes.
Yeah, that's right. And, we also discussed at one point how innovations from Formula One then contributed to other industries. Yes. And even though the idea was borrowed from airspace, it kind of went back to airspace afterwards as well. So very, very interesting kind of dynamics. yeah, so Chapman definitely kind of we already talked about him a lot, and he definitely was a visionary and borrowed from many different his ideas from many different industries, and yeah, just absolutely genius engineer and manufacturer. Yeah,
That's right. Now we're
yeah,
coming to the
BRM.
British Racing Motors P207, the last BRM car, not the last year, because the P207 was still used by I think by a private team in the next year, but this was really the last car produced by BRM.
And in blue.
And in blue.
Yeah,
For
strangely.
whatever
yeah.
reason, but of course for sponsor reason.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, Penske.
Penske from the US, the PC4. Penske, they participated with its team in 76, but decided to leave Formula One. So they sold, I think, their team and their cars to the German RTS team. So these cars had been used in 77 by the German ATS team before they would really design their first own car for the next season. RTS, small team, but stayed for quite some years in Formula One.
That's right.
And RTS normally in yellow, and with this we are coming to Renault.
Yeah.
Famous always in yellow, only if they race as Alpine, then they change to blue, but yellow is the normal color for this team.
Yeah, RS01 that we've already talked about throughout this episode. Yeah, turbocharged car. Very cool.
Yeah, I assume it stands for Renault Sport, the first one. So really also quite iconic, of course, the yellow Renaults, and an idea which wouldn't start winning from the beginning, but later on would become quite successful.
Yeah, and Michelin tires. There we go.
Exactly. Also all French.
Yeah. Shadow. Yeah, this is a very nice, cute car.
Yep.
In white. And
yep.
Yeah, they, as you can see, if you see it on your screen, they didn't have as much sponsorships as others, but
yep.
nevertheless, a very cute looking car.
Yeah. And somehow, white became like the national color for the US. Just Haas presented today. It's designed for 2020, and it practically looks like last year. Mostly white.
Yes. Yeah, and Surtees also in white. And again, I just want to remind you that normally when you paint a Formula One car, you first paint it white and then you painted some other color on top. And this is why also white cars are lighter, right? So and cheaper to produce.
And I assume also in summer it's not that hot, as in opposite to your colleagues who sit in a black car.
In a black car, yeah.
Yep.
And here is this Wolf that Patrick mentioned before that basically stole the I'm not gonna say stole, but used the same colors as Lotus, black. And
Walter Wolf. Walter Wolf, a very fascinating character, an immigrant originally from Austria, who went to Canada, and I'm sure we also have to speak about this small team as there are so many stories around. And again, at least in 77, very fast and successful.
Yeah, Hesketh.
Hesketh.
In blue.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Hesketh has been a little bit in 77 like a has been. I mean, these are the rests of the former famous team. So And I mean,
and the feminists would not appreciate this car at all, because it's got some women drawn on them. Anyway.
Exactly, and I mean, if you remember the Rush movie, you know that it was the original idea by Lord Hesketh to do not have any kind of sponsoring.
Sponsors.
And as I said, this team is a little bit has been not much in relation with the original Hesketh, so they also gave up on that idea, and they had been looking for sponsoring.
Mm-hmm.
From blue, we go back to yellow.
Fittipaldi,
Not that fast, but very fast looking, at least on this photo, in the Brazilian national color yellow with the Brazilian flag, Brazilian driver. So this has been the all Brazilian team in opposite to the all French Renault.
Yeah, and don't we all regret that Emerson Fittipaldi switched to this car? Despite it being Brazilian, and it's really cool for Brazil to have their own team, but at the same time, kind of I feel sad that he didn't drive for kind of more competitive teams in his career.
Yeah, and we discussed it more in the.
Yeah, I think he kind of ended his career early because of this idea to have his own team with his brother.
Yeah, well, at least in Formula One, because later he returned to the Marlboro colors, at least in IndyCar. So in general, he had a very long career, but in Formula One,
but in Formula
it went relatively short.
Yeah,
at least a short in the years where he was competitive. And we finish like the years before with the Japanese Kojima K009, which practically, I think, only participated in the Japanese race.
Yeah, and it's a black car.
Black car, so quite the opposite what you would expect from a Japanese car, and in opposite to the other Japanese car, which I unfortunately forgot the name, which started in white with the red sun. So the typical Japanese design.
Honda, we had several Honda.
Yeah, of course, Honda, but I didn't meant Honda. I meant the small one, which have been active in the 70s.
Okay, I'm not sure which one you mean, but anyway, we will just move on to people at this stage. And Niki Lauda in first place, and 28 years old, and what a brave guy. I mean, what a brave guy. What can we say? I mean, it's many drivers would have quit in his place, but he not only got back into the driving seat, but won the 1977 season, which is great.
Exactly, his second drivers' championship.
Mm-hmm. Jody Scheckter in Wolf. And Mario Andretti in Lotus.
Yeah. And some people which should win championships in the following years. Yeah,
and you see Mario Andretti is almost 10 years older than both Niki Lauda and Jody Scheckter. Which is also, again, shows you the vision of Colin Chapman, who, went for a more experienced driver rather than going for younger talent.
And this is a relevant difference to Williams, so to what we discussed earlier in this episode, where Colin Chapman had new ideas, new cars, but let's say older drivers in opposite to the technology.
Yeah, that's right. But I mean, I think to work with, new technology, to be able to constantly adapt to a lot of innovation, you probably need to have some experience at least.
Yeah. Yep, completely agreeing about that.
Yeah.
Then Carlos Reutemann in the second Ferrari, of course, important his results for the Constructors' Championship. Also a little bit older, is 34 years in that year.
And
And
James
then
Hunt.
only, and then only the two McLaren drivers, James Hunt and Jochen Maas. And here we would go dig a little bit deeper, as we mentioned in the beginning, especially because you may ask what happened to James Hunt after being the hero, the champion of 76. And it's also related to Niki Lauda's statement that after 76 he had proven everything he had to prove and he wasn't motivated anymore. But let's see the data we have. We have here the results from qualification and the races. James Hunt got 7 pole positions. So I think this should show that he was motivated and also, of course, that the car was fast. So in average, he qualified on the 3.2 position. In opposite to Jochen Maas, who only had been on position 9.5 in average, something which we discussed in the past. In the 1970s, the teams have been smaller, and mostly the number 1 driver had a better car than the number 2 driver, which includes an engine delivered by Ford who had some horsepower more than the engine which got the number 2 driver. This may explain a little bit the high gap in the qualification, and that the gap gets smaller in the race itself, where the quality of the motor, the horsepower is a little bit less important than for the qualification.
Yeah, and again, I just want to point out the picture that we have for the car, McLaren car, that as you see on this page, and it is, even though it is red, it is kind of orange.
Yeah, for Ganna it's orange.
Yeah, but it is. Look at it. It's a lot more. There's a lot more yellow in this red. But yeah, I just want to say, about about this kind of standoff between James Hunt and Niki Lauda. I think also, you could tell from 1977 season results that psychologically, Niki Lauda definitely prevailed. And this is, I think it's just probably very difficult to race against Niki Lauda under these circumstances when he has a very strong car and obviously a very cool character, as it turned out. So this is probably not only the result of the car being not as reliable as Ferrari, but also psychologically it's difficult to do that.
I completely agree that Niki Lauda was the strong driver, but to defend James Hunt, you see here the numbers. In 8 races he had to retire, and if you retire 8 times, of course you cannot win a championship, and also you're losing a lot of experience to learn about the car. So very frustrating year for James Hunt.
Yeah, I'm not trying to kind of devalue the contribution of James Hunt to the sport, and we had a very cool special about him, so please check it out. But I'm just saying that it is very on top of all the problems with reliability, we also have to consider the fact that the psychological factors here.
Yeah, of course, everything goes together. And just to finish, you also may check out, of course, our special on Jochen Maas. So about both of the drivers, we have a special available.
Yeah.
Then positions 7 to 9, Alan Jones with the Shadow. I think also here the driver was better than the car, which his talent he should prove later with, especially with Williams.
Yeah. Gunnar Nielsen, we mentioned him before, and Patrick Depailler, again, Tyrrell driver. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was the season. Behavior, notable characters.
Niki Lauda.
Maybe I just wanted to say, I assume you will agree that it was Niki Lauda, as we showed in the beginning. It was the third act of the play where our hero accepted his challenges and overcame the problems and won the trophy. So for us too, Niki Lauda.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, notable wins, I think there were quite a few that season. Of course, I would like to kind of point out Mario Andretti's wins. Definitely Silverstone, James Hunt. So probably if I had to pick one of Mario Andretti's, that would be Monza for Mario Andretti. Then obviously James Hunt's victory in Silverstone, and I mean we could talk about many races for Niki Lauda, but I guess the German Grand Prix, right? You have to.
Yeah, I would go with Mario Andretti, as it was the victory for Mario himself, but also the victory for this new concept. The new technology, the ground effect car, which was working since the beginning in opposite, for example, to Renault, where the technology only would years later win championships. So I think for this, I would also go with the victory from Mario Andretti.
Well, notable accidents were obviously already mentioned. The two fatal accidents for the marshals. And
the other involved,
the photographer. Yeah, so essentially, I mean that highlighted the lack of safety for the marshals. And the strategies, of course, I think this is something that we highlighted at the beginning. Here we should mention, I would like to mention anyway 3 teams. So with obviously Lotus, Renault, and Ferrari. So this would be the 3 teams that really stood out that season.
Exactly, and just to resume, Lotus having the revolutionary technology paired with an experienced driver, Renault with having the complete revolution of the turbo engine, and Ferrari being practically the opposite to this, having a very conventional car, continuous development, so no revolution, but a cautious evolution, sustainability, and this was this year the winning factor, I think, for the Scuderia. Legacy.
Yeah, again, this is definitely Niki Lauda's year, and finally, we see the victory, and considering that he kind of how quickly he put himself together in 1976, it's well-deserved victory for Niki Lauda.
Yes.
And also, I think demonstrates the victory of this calculated and statistical approach to Formula One, right? That it is also, it's not only the skill, but it's also science. I think this season demonstrated it very, very well.
Exactly, and that's why he was called the computer. I agree, and I would add, as we spoke, it was the dawn of the ground effect car, the dawn of the turbo area. So it's a little bit, I think we are in a change of times in Formula One, becoming a more modern Formula One, where we have these new technologies. So I think it was a time of changing technologies, where we still had the conventional Ferrari, very competitive, but also the new Lotus who could win races. So I think it was something like a change of times.
Definitely. All right. So with that, we come to the end of this episode. Thanks a lot for being with us, and don't forget that we have video on now YouTube and Spotify, and thanks to Patrick, we're also present on I don't know how many, but many different platforms.
You cannot escape us.
Yeah, so please check out other episodes. And again, we do not want to say that we know everything. We don't. So please tell us if we missed something, or you disagree with us, or you agree with us. And it's been really great to hear from our viewers lately. So we had some really cool comments and a lot of positive feedback. So thank you guys for being with us. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, and see you hopefully the next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.